Hi guys, so in this video I wanted to share some of my experience of growing Anubias plants in aquarium. I've had quite a lot of different species of Anubias plants in my various aquariums over the last several years. So I wanted to share some of my tips which some of you might find useful. So Anubias plants are often considered to be indestructible aquarium plants that can grow both in hotter temperatures and in cooler temperatures. They're recommended normally for warm water systems like discus tanks because they can withstand really high temperatures. They're also recommended for cooler subtropical setups because they can also endure lower temperatures. Very often you would hear that Anubias don't really need bright lights. They can survive and they can grow efficiently in low lights. And yeah, so we're going to look at some of these issues more in details right now. But first I want to show you what kind of Anubias plants I currently have. So the focus will be on my sump tank because that's where all of my Anubias plants are currently growing. I've got here Anubias barteri broadleaf and it's flowering. Over here I've got Anubias barteri. It's just a regular barteri, it's not broadleaf. It's the same species but just different varieties. Then over here I've got Anubias nana. It looks very similar to barteri, but it has smaller leaves, like so. And I've got here one small Anubias gracilis, and over there in the back there is a pretty large Anubias gracilis. It's the same thing, it's just a relatively large bush over here. Both gracilis and barteri, they actually grow immersed, so half immersed. They have part of the leaves and all of their roots under the water, but they produce immersed leaves, so the leaves are dry. And the same goes for gracilis over here. Right, it has a number of immersed leaves. Sure, I'm not going to talk about some basics of growing Anubias plants because you can find plenty of that information online or on YouTube. I'll focus on something that you may not know or you may not find easily in other sources. So, lighting. It's a widespread myth that Anubias don't need bright light, that they need low light in order to grow, and they don't actually like bright light. They need low light and they will grow perfectly fine in low light. Well, yes, that's partly true. Anubias can survive in low light. They can survive and they can even probably grow in low light, but they will grow relatively slow in low light systems. Yes, they will survive, but they will probably produce like one leaf in a couple of months or something like that. Based on my own experience, I can say that Anubias needs plenty of light in order to grow fast. It doesn't really need CO2, it doesn't really need fertilizers, that's absolutely correct, but it does need relatively bright light. Again, you don't need some kind of a specialized aquascaper type of fancy high-end lighting systems or something like that, just a regular bright light, not too bright of course. Over here I've got a lamp, it's just a regular aquarium lamp. It's not anything fancy and it's not too bright, it's just I think it has 40 something LED lights in here, so it's not overly bright, but you can see that this is a direct light and have about 8 to 9 hour lighting day here, and my Anubias plants, they just love it. You can see they produce flowers and they also produce about one leaf per week, which is quite fast and which is probably what you want to achieve with your Anubias plants. Most likely you would want them to grow faster rather than slower because you would like to have larger bushes. And I've bought these Anubias plants at a really small size. They each were about this size and they've grown in these huge bushes probably over less than a year, maybe like 7 or 8 months, and each new leaf is larger than the previous ones, which is an indicator that your Anubias plants are doing great. So in terms of lighting, try to get bright direct light. It shouldn't be too bright, but definitely your Anubias plants will appreciate sufficient light, and they will grow really fast in good lighting. Temperature. I've said before that Anubias will thrive in warmer temperatures and in cooler temperatures, and I've kept it both in my discus tanks at about 30 degrees Celsius, and I've kept it in my temperate tanks at about 20 degrees Celsius. In both of these setups, Anubias did not really grow well. Well, it can survive hotter temperatures. I've kept Anubias at probably over 32, at about 35 degrees Celsius when I was treating my discus tanks for various diseases, and they have survived, but they didn't really grow fast. They had sufficient fertilizers, they had enough light, everything seemed to be fine, but they didn't really enjoy particularly high temperatures. They will survive in these temperatures, but they will not thrive. The same goes for lower temperatures. The perfect temperature for Anubias is about 25 to 26 degrees Celsius. Planting. We all know that Anubias plants need to be attached to driftwood or rocks, that they shouldn't be buried in substrates, that the rhizome, well, this part here with the roots on, it shouldn't be buried in substrate, otherwise it will start decaying. So it has to be somewhere up in the water column. Well, there's three other ways of planting Anubias. One of these ways is just to let them hang like this in a free flow. They're not attached to anything, and well, they produce very healthy roots, and they're also quite flexible, so you can move them around, you can remove them from the fish tank if you need to clean it, and they're feeling perfectly fine. So they can be a floating plant. Another way of planting Anubias is attaching it to the glass with suction cups. It's similarly convenient, particularly if you have a larger tank. Over here I obviously have small tanks, so it's okay for me that they float like this. I mean, there is no flow, and there is no other plants or big fish, so that's absolutely fine. But if you want to attach them in a larger tank, particularly a bare bottom tank, and you don't want to use rocks or you don't want to use driftwood, you can attach them with suction cups to the glass, and they will grow perfectly fine. This is a video of how I used to grow Anubias attached to the glass with the suction cups previously. And a third way, which is probably the most recommended, at least by me, way of planting Anubias. You can only do that if you have a tank with a substrate, if you have a planted tank with some sort of a nutritious, rich in nutrients substrate. What I would recommend you doing is to bury the roots of Anubias in that substrate, but not the rhizome. Rhizome has to be up. It shouldn't be buried in substrate. So you only bury the roots, and then you probably attach it with a driftwood or with a suction cup to a glass or to something else. So it kind of has its roots in the substrate, but not the rhizome. If it has its roots in your rich, nutritious substrate, it will grow really fast, because it will take all the nutrients from the substrate. And its rhizome, again, it's very important that the rhizome is not in the substrate. So it's just the roots, but not the rhizome. Rhizome has to be up there. It shouldn't be covered by the substrate. I found this way probably the most efficient way of growing Anubias, and they will grow really fast. And lastly, I just want to say a couple of words about propagation. You can propagate Anubias in two ways. First is using seeds, and the second way is cutting rhizome. I've never propagated Anubias through seeds, although I have here flowers and they flower regularly, so I could have removed those seeds later on from the flower, and I could have propagated Anubias through those seeds, but that's a lot of work, and I don't really have space or time to do that, so I've never ever done that, and there's not much I can say about it. The second way is to cut the rhizome into smaller parts. So it's basically you just cut some parts of the rhizome, and you've had one plant, you will have 2 or 3 plants. It will take Anubias plant a new freshly cut piece of Anubias plant some time to get used to living separately from the rest of the plant, but probably within a couple of weeks it should adapt and it should send out new roots and new leaves, and it will start growing. So that should work quite well in terms of propagation, unless of course you're breeding it on a commercial scale, in which case you would like to propagate it through seeds. And I thought it's a good idea to add some pictures of my previous tanks with Anubias plants in them, and various different setups and various different ways I have used to plant Anubias in these tanks. Some of them are, well, many of them are discus tanks, so you can see how it looks like in discus tanks. So I hope this video was useful. Don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section, and if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you soon in a forthcoming video about my display tank.